Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Beer Blather 239. Hassan, the dead terrorist. Oh, God, I love the sound of that. Ding dong, the asshole's gone. Just like that. Well, Blinken was desperately trying to find an accommodation for the Hezbollocks, and the world was trying to process the deballing of hundreds of Hezbollocks operatives. It happened. The terrorists who promised the elimination of the Jews and the West. The chumps who grew old in the U.S. most wanted list while Uncle Sam killed time looking at his own navel. The Iran tools who rained death and misery from northern Israel to Buenos Aires, from Paris to Beirut, went out with a whimper. It took an Israeli leader with titanium balls to show to the world that the emperor was butt naked and crying in a corner. But Iran will surely retaliate. Sure. They'll throw a couple of dead goats over the border and call it a day. Maybe kill some poor gay chap and stone a girl to channel their frustration. The world has been held hostage by a band of Stone Age apes long enough. Without their social democrat allies in the West, it would have been impossible. But they finally overextended. We have said here, time and again, that October 7th marked a point of inflection and created a new paradigm. Israel could no longer afford to follow the containment policies imposed by morons sitting comfortably in their homes in Avenue Foch or in Pennsylvania Avenue, sipping margaritas and pretending the suffering of Israelis was a small price to pay for their deals with the mullahs. Sanctions are good business for corrupt politicians. In less than 1 year, the Jews, Muslims, Christians, and atheists of Israel have dispatched to hell more terrorists than the rest of the world combined in the previous 30 years. Hamas is no more. Hezbollocks is a bad memory. The Houthis and other proxies are checking out soon, and Iran looks more and more like a target than a threat. Meanwhile, the so-called Arab street, rather than burn in anger, is celebrating the extirpation of the tumor. The last defenders of terrorism are in the la-la land of American universities, the British Labour government, and the Democratic Party in America. But the wailings of Rashida Tlaib and Noam Chomsky, the ululating cries of Keir Starmer and Jeremy Corbyn, and the duplicity of Foggy Bottom are not enough to stop what's coming. The Middle East is on the mend, as soon will be Eastern Europe. Rejoice. The beginning of the end of the bullshit era is at hand. Say a word of thanks to the leadership of Israel. The right people in the right place at the right time. And remember, dead terrorists are no threat anymore. In November, save America from the clutches of retarded lowlifes and boot the fascists out. This is Sol Montes Bradley, the largest human repository of useless information from Florida. And right next to me, the great Thomas Victor, the only living expert in World War I flamethrowers and sage extraordinaire. Californication, because he doesn't get everything right. And he is in California, you know. One of these days. Thomas, how are you other than happy and enjoying the moment?
Happy and enjoying the moment. All I did today was go and pick up my car. I had the window wouldn't roll up, and it had a rough idle, so I took it to the dealership and rented a car at an extremely great rate. And when I turned the car in today, before I picked up my car, they gave me a day off for being a nice guy, because apparently in the service industry, you don't run into nice customers anymore. So it pays to be nice. It's a good advice to everybody. And in the case of Israel, They pretended they were being nice, but what they were actually doing is they were setting up a massive series of consecutive operations that has basically, I would say, it's crippled Hezbollah. There's a lot of people who are being cautious, but what is there to be cautious about?
Thomas, it's like ISIS. Of course, there are going to be a bunch of assholes out there, nostalgic for the good old times and ready to attack with a knife or a gun anybody they can. Uh, but as an army, they exist no more. Their ability to hold government hostages and control swaths of land where they can come and go as they please and hold stocks of weapons is gone.
Well, what I noticed, what I thought was really fascinating, the press, the AP basically wrote a tear-jerking eulogy for this guy, for Hassan Nasrallah, and the Western press rather, they had no problem with Hezbollah because Hezbollah was attacking the Jewish people. And it goes without saying that if you're a reporter, you've got a greater than 90% chance of disliking Jewish people. But the reality is that Hezbollah had their boots on everybody's neck, which is evidenced by the fact that there were celebrations all over the Middle East. Almost every country, with the exception of Qatar, had dancing in the street celebrations celebrating the death of Nasrallah and the destruction of Hezbollah. So that tells you how hideous this organization was. And unfortunately for Hezbollah was never more than a guerrilla force. That's all it was. And when they went up against a 21st or possibly even 22nd, exactly, it's got to be Lebanon because of women in the crowd.
This is actually Iranian.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Remember? Oh God! Let me put it back. Hold on. This is. I got this one from Shida, an Iranian friend of mine. She's an activist for the rights of Christians in Iran, and she sent me this one.
Yeah.
How about that? This is how Iranians are mourning these assholes.
Well, this is the thing that we as Americans can't understand the notion. Just imagine Antifa. Just imagine Antifa having its tendrils all over this country and breaking down your door and killing your loved ones if you dared get out of line.
Yep.
Something along those lines. We can't even imagine that. For one thing, we have the Second Amendment, which was designed to prevent that sort of thing. But these countries, okay, something like Hezbollah is a relic of the past. And those people there are probably pretty indistinguishable from our young people here, other than language. And there's, of course, going to be cultural differences, but not gigantic.
No. Listen, they were all part of the Roman Empire. We have common roots that go back 3,000 years.
Yeah.
And even, while it was the Ottoman Empire, the Ottomans were in constant commerce and trade and political alliances with Germany, with the Romania, uh, with Austria at one time. Uh, in the First World War, the reason the Ottoman Empire collapsed is they were allies of Germany in World War I. So, contrary to what people believe, by commerce, by trade, by family ties, by culture, from the cultivation of olives to whatever the hell you want, uh, they're very much like us. We do have common grandparents.
Well, another thing to point out is that while most people weren't looking, there's been a shift. And now I believe the majority of Middle Easterners accept Israelis as fellow Middle Easterners. So it's more acceptable for Israel to have taken out Nasrallah than it would be for, say, us, because all the baggage we have, and we're outsiders coming in doing this. The fact that it's fellow Middle Easterners doing this allows them to. I mean, I've read some amazing praise of Israel written by Muslim Arabs saying, our sacred brothers have done this great favor, and things like that. And they wouldn't be.
I've heard it from Mohammed bin Salman and great influencers in Saudi.
Oh, and just before we move off of Mohammed bin Salman, he just outlawed sermons in Saudi Arabia meant to rile people up to the Palestinian cause, and that's now illegal in Saudi Arabia. And he was asked in an interview, "Don't you even care about the Palestinians?" And he said, "Frankly, no."
No, I don't care about the Palestinians. He actually said that.
He did.
And the new shall we say regulation is the prohibition to imams throughout the kingdom, and you know what that means,
Mm-hmm.
to pray for Palestine, or even mentioning in their sermons Palestine.
Yep.
And I'm talking about the same event that you are talking about. He was asked specifically, does that mean you don't care? And he said that personally he doesn't give a hoot about the Palestinian issue,
Yeah.
and that there is no place for political slogans in the Hajj in Mecca and Medina.
Right. So what Americans who are very suspicious of Saudi Arabia need to recognize, the Saudis are implementing the separation of church and state.
Yep.
So you can't ask for anything better than that. Um,
He said before and repeated recently that he says, I want to go back to what we were. A
yeah.
place open to all peoples of all religions, of all cultures, to come and be safe.
Right. He has said in plain language, in Saudi Arabia, you can be religious, you can be non-religious, you can be an atheist. You have the freedom to do all these things without interference from the government.
Yes.
Again, this is what we want in our country. And, and another point, okay, the Palestinians have worked really hard to get where they are today. What's the famous quote from the Israeli politician that they never fail to grasp failure from the jaws of victory, or something along those lines?
Yeah, something along those lines. I have a vague recollection of that one. The
Right.
first thing that comes to mind is Golda Meir, but it was a different phrase.
It was a man.
Yeah, they have never missed an opportunity to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory.
Exactly, something along those lines. And the Palestinians have brought everything down on their own heads, so they don't deserve the world's sympathy. What they need, and what they're probably going to get, Israel is going to be in charge of Gaza's security and also the West Bank. And then we're going to have some Arabs, some Gulf Arabs, probably the Emiratis, go in, rebuild, institute schooling that stays away from religion, and basically the Palestinians are going to be on probation for a couple of generations. And
Take it 40 years.
yeah,
If Moses could wait 40 years in the desert before coming to the promised land, these suckers can spend 40 years at the beach.
right. And it's you hear a lot of complaints about war.
Oh my!
Well, this is war. This is all out war. And what people don't understand is that the Israelis could have solved the problem in Gaza in about 3 days.
Yeah.
But they chose not to do that. They could have solved.
Did you hear Netanyahu as he was leaving New York?
What?
Hamas could stop this now if they surrender, give up their weapons, and release the hostages.
Yeah.
Hezbollah could stop this now if they give up the weapons and withdraw north of the Litani. But they're not going to do it. And if they don't do it, our only option is total victory.
Yeah. And
he used the words. He's paraphrasing Churchill now.
Yeah, Churchill and FDR. I mean, you can't expect the Israelis. Netanyahu also said nobody started talking about ceasefires with Hezbollah until we started defending ourselves. Nobody was calling on Hezbollah to stop firing missiles into Israel. And
because it was tolerable. It's very easy to put up with Hamas and Hezbollah firing missiles and rockets into Israel to the tune of 10 to 30,000 a year. When you're sitting by the fireside in some dacha in Virginia, of course there are no dachas in Virginia, but you get the point, scratching their nuts and making deals with the mullahs because, we need them as a regional power, right?
Well, that's what Condoleezza Rice told George W. Bush, and that's why she was able to talk him out of any rational form of military action that would have stopped the Iranians from killing American troops.
20 years ago.
Said we need them for the Middle Eastern peace process, and it's like they don't want peace. Like I didn't go to Stanford or wherever the hell, but I know that the Iranians don't want peace. So they have to be killed or beaten into the ground.
But did you hear yourself just now? Because, of course, it's not something you said, but something she said, and something that a lot of people in Washington say, and something that makes my blood boil when I'm in meetings in D.C. We cannot do anything because it will affect the peace process. What the fuck is the purpose of the peace process, you idiots? You're trading the pursuit of peace for the pursuit of the process.
Well, also there is no peace process. There's this is exactly like us demanding that the North Koreans first kneel to us and then we'll talk to them, which was something they were never going to do given the East Asian value that they put on face. So Trump swept all of that away by meeting with Kim Jong-un to great criticism. And all these years later, the North Koreans have not returned to their anti-American propaganda. So Trump made a difference. And every now and then they fire missiles into the ocean and everybody goes, whoop, 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 whoop.
Yeah, and they send missiles to the Russians that have a tendency lately to explode in their warehouses.
And we don't know if that's deliberate or not. I mean, we don't know. And Trump demolished that brainless policy by allowing the North Koreans to bank so much face that they didn't have to do a lot of the things they were doing before. They have the face. Hey, we're the country that Trump stepped into our country. And everybody remembers that in the Far East. So it was a brilliant move on his part. And of course, a lot of idiot American diplomats said it was a disaster. And what
Yeah,
they,
like the Moab in Afghanistan, that was a disaster too.
well, apparently success is a disaster, and futility and an eternal hamster wheel of diplomacy, that is success. Diplomacy
Well,
for its own sake.
that is the livelihood, savings, and retirement of a lot of assholes. This is the same thing as the Wild World Fund, or the Save the Animal with the Cute Eyes Foundation, or the these are all grifts. These are all people who make a shitload of money getting grants from the government and donations from idiots so that they can give themselves $500,000 to $1 million salaries and have padded expense accounts and live like freaking kings off of your money and mine while absolutely doing diddle shit. And the same thing applies to the migrants. Every single non-government organization that is rescuing migrants in the Mediterranean or assisting them en route to the US are nothing but scams where a few people make a shitload of money by convincing morons to donate to the cause and the US government to fund it. The
Well,
same thing happens with the peace process. The peace process is nothing but good business for an industry of uh, 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 how shall I say, the think tanks and universities.
well,
Uh,
soulless
uh,
ghouls.
hmm?
Soulless ghouls is who they are.
Soulless schools like Noam Chomsky,
Yeah.
uh, who make fortunes throughout their life peddling this notion. And who could be against peace? I'm for peace. Are you for peace? We're all for peace. Let's sing Kumbaya. Bullshit. You know how you get to peace with the terrorists of Hezbollah and the Houthis and all that jazz? Total fucking victory. Then we have peace.
Well, General Curtis LeMay, who was one of our greatest Air Force generals, said if you kill enough of the enemy, he stops fighting.
Yes,
Can't argue with that.
that's all there is to it. The peace process is a canard, is an invention for people who need government funding so that they can keep bullshitting around a round table.
Well,
Toast to the great General Soleimani, so that our partner in negotiation. Remember when the abomination closed down Operation Cassandra? Do you remember that one?
refresh my memory. There's so many that he.
I will in the shortest possible way. Operation Cassandra was a joint operation, FBI, DEA, everybody, the whole alphabet town was there, that was chasing drug, weapons, and money traffic in between Mexico and Central and South America. That was being used to finance the cartels, the drug traffic to the US, and all that jazz. And they managed to identify a network that involved a couple of Lebanese tycoons using Lebanese flagged ships to bring in weapons to Central America, which the cartels then introduced into the US, and take drugs to Europe. They used to store them in Barcelona. They didn't distribute out of Barcelona, but they stored it in Barcelona. And then there was the money laundering schemes through banks in Panama, Colombia, and Venezuela. And they got them set to rights. And then the Obama administration closed the operation because they had identified as the heads of the money laundering operation the two assholes from the Revolutionary Guard that were negotiating the Iranian deal with Kerry.
Yeah, and I mean, a negotiation makes an assumption that both sides want to get to they want the same thing, but they just don't know how to get it. The Iranians don't want the same things that we want. They want mass murder. They want religious domination. They want extermination of entire people. They want genocide. So what's there to negotiate with these guys? They don't want any of the same things that we want. And the notion that they do, I mean, but I mean, okay, there was an Iranian news photographer who was accompanying one of the times that we had the negotiation on the framework. It wasn't a nuclear deal, it was a framework. And this guy defected, and he said the American negotiators were negotiating on behalf of Iran. And it sure as hell seemed like Obama was doing his best to help Iran get its hands on a nuclear weapon. And
yes. And Biden wasn't any more constrained when Iran claimed that they didn't want to have any discussions with the Americans, and the U.S. asked Putin to negotiate on America's behalf.
Brilliant.
And they had the negotiations in Vienna, and the Russian Ulyanov was his name, from the foreign ministry of Russia, who was negotiating there in the name of the Americans. They came out of the last meeting, and he says it's amazing how good negotiators the Iranians are. They got everything they asked for. He's the one who gave it to them.
Yeah, because they came in with a list, and he said, okay.
Would you like anything else? Did you forget anything? This now.
The only thing that stopped...
And we were signing that agreement, and the only reason that we did not sign that agreement is because all shit broke loose with Russia.
Invading Ukraine.
And returned the sanctions by saying we're not guaranteeing the deal now.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
We came this close, but see, this is the U.S. State Department or professional diplomats. They're absolutely not acting in the interests of the United States. They never have been. It's like the FBI. The FBI was ruled by the same guy, the same transvestite for 50 years.
Hoover, that
right, and it's never recovered. It's a permanently dysfunctional organization, and the same with the State Department. So the State Department,
you know that with all my studies, there was a time where the State Department was amazing, where our envoys, our consuls, were incredibly intelligent, shrewd, and effective.
Yeah, in the 18th century, right?
19th.
Okay, the 19th century.
And then, after Wilson, the whole thing turned to shit. For a while, it was like half and half. There were interesting people surrounded by assholes. Now, only the assholes remain.
Yeah, and you know, for one thing, these are people who are totally full of themselves. And what I believe they believe is that the world should be, it should be a world in which every single country has exactly the same influence. So Andorra, for example, is a superpower along with the U.S. I mean,
that nice pick, by the way.
Yeah, I mean,
I love Andorra.
Andorra's fine, but it's not a superpower. It's never going to be a superpower. Luxembourg.
Oh, God, are you kidding me?
I'm
And,
from.
and Andorra cannot compete with a single neighborhood in Manhattan.
My ancestors are from Luxembourg, but when World War I broke out, the king ordered his 300-man army to just stand by the side of the road as the Germans marched through.
What else could they do?
Exactly.
What is a 300-man army? I don't think Andorra has 20.
Yeah, I mean, we have
They
to.
double as police officers.
The State Department doesn't deal in harsh reality, and when you are negotiating with a group of people who are acting in bad faith. Okay, Trump negotiated with North Korea, and he said they're not quite there, so we didn't sign an agreement. He basically praised them for giving it a try, and it was pretty amazing to see the North Koreans sitting down. I don't know if you remember the press screaming at Kim Jong-un. He's sitting there. I mean, he's never faced anything like this in his life. And they said, "Are you actually serious about these negotiations?" And his answer was, "I wouldn't be here if I wasn't serious." And it was like, and Trump looked at him and smiled and looked at the press, and he was just like, so I believe that the North Koreans were acting in good faith, but they've never done this before.
From a different planet.
There's going to be a lot of false starts.
Yeah. We don't have to get a common language. We got to get some translation on the way of thinking.
Exactly. And in the case of the Iranians, I mean, the Iranians came from a culture that was about as advanced as you could be in the Middle East. So those guys sitting across the table from our negotiators or the Russians or whomever, they know what they're doing. They're acting in complete bad faith. These are total bad faith actors. And to pretend otherwise is...
You had John Kerry and his merry band of nincompoops negotiating a deal with Iran, and on the other side of the table were the assholes who were supervising the money laundering and drug smuggling into the U.S.
Yeah.
It was never mentioned.
No, of course not, because Kerry discreetly averted his eyes from that, because that would be indiscreet to mention something like that.
Then it turns out, by the way, that Kerry has a shitload of businesses with Iran.
Of course.
Remember all the weddings he attended and all that jazz. Remember his negotiations. By the way, in violation of every fucking law there is on the subject matter. His negotiations with Margherita Mogherini to undermine the Trump State Department, because don't worry, don't give up, this too shall pass.
Well, we have to remember that the Obama administration was the most lawless administration we've ever had, and even more so than the Biden administration. I credit...
You say potato, I say potato.
Well, I credit Biden's dementia from preventing him from being even more lawless.
Okay, I'll buy that.
But see, diplomats are fools. I saw a movie about the Benghazi attack, and it was a movie, but it was apparently based on words and deeds of the people who were there.
13 hours?
Pardon me, 13 hours, yeah.
Yeah.
And that poor ambassador didn't understand anything. I mean, he was totally taken by surprise by everything. And, it was his whole approach, the State Department's approach is, don't worry your little head and leave it to the professionals. Well, when the professionals are living in a fantasy land, then it's time to worry our pretty little heads.
Do you remember why he was in Benghazi and not in Tripoli?
No, I don't. I used to know it, but I don't remember.
Okay. Every year, the State Department has to have an inventory and survey of all of its facilities around the world, and it's part of the request for a new budget. They were in the process of completing that inventory, but they didn't have the inventory from Benghazi, and they didn't have anybody who could take it. And Hillary personally asked the ambassador to do it. And the moron actually went to Benghazi without security
Yeah, I remember that.
to do the inventory. Because, I mean, the Brits just left their facility in Benghazi, packed and went home because they're all idiots. We don't have a problem because we have an understanding with these people.
Yeah, yeah, and when they saw policemen who were scoping out the area and taking measurements and things like that, this guy was unperturbed. It's like, well, don't worry about it. And
Yeah, don't worry about it. Nothing. We have everything under control. And poor thing. I mean, my heart goes out to his family,
sure,
and I mourn his loss. He was, by all references, a good chap. But unfortunately, stupidity kills.
well, basically, he died of smoke inhalation in their panic room. The panic
Yes,
room was not. I mean, what the terrorists did was they set alight a bunch of rags and things and stuffed them, under the
yeah.
door.
There were actually windows to the panic room. Talk
Exactly.
about being an imbecile.
Yeah, and so they filled the room with smoke, and he died of smoke inhalation. And again, I mean, we can go into the whole sort of Leon Panetta refusal to send in troops,
Yep.
lying through his teeth, saying we don't send in troops when we don't know what the situation is. And
Yep.
it's like, no, the combatant commander in extremis force is exactly who you send in. You send
Exactly.
you
And they were ready, and they were ready 45 minutes ago, away.
exactly,
And,
and
and he lied to all of us when he said that we didn't have troops that could make it in time. That's bullshit.
yeah, there were some in Croatia and there were some in Italy.
In Singonella.
Exactly,
In
and
Singonella, the Rapid Deployment Force. Singonella is 45 minutes flight away.
right, and those. The reason it's called an in extremis force is because it's used when you don't know what's going on. You are in extremis. So these guys come in, and these are all Green Berets. So they're not going to be lost lambs in the forest. Like, all you have to do is send them in to where they can land safely, tell them where the objective is, and they'll find a way to get there. They're not idiots. They're not going to run into gunfire.
I
They know what
spoke,
they're doing.
I spoke with 3 or 4 that were in Singonella. They were ready. They were by the plane uh, within minutes of the attack, waiting for the order that never came.
Yeah,
These are, big, strong mothers who have fear of no one. But they were tear eyed when they were telling me of their frustration because they were watching the events unfold and they could do nothing because their hands were tied.
well, see, this is the thing that Panetta. The only thing he was worried about was covering his own ass, and that's it. Um, and once you have a leader who only cares about his own personal reputation, or having to answer to something, having to make a decision that may not turn out. I mean, anytime you make a decision to send troops into harm's way, there are going to be parts of that mission that are going to go south. That's all there is to it. And you know, in this era more than any other, we're making political hay of this type of thing. But you still have to do what's right. You can't just hang people out to dry, and that's what we did in Benghazi. And then they lied about it. They sent Susan Rice out to, like, take a bullet for the team, and
Jeez.
and they still lied. They said, there were protests. There were no protests in all of Libya. There were no protests against that movie trailer in all of Libya.
Not at all. There were a bunch of assholes toting RPGs, which, as you know, it's a handy tool of protests.
Well,
RPG.
by 150 terrorists armed with every shoulder fired weapons, heavy
Yeah.
machine guns, anti-guided anti-tank missiles, and they were driving around in trucks that had them marked as Al Qaeda affiliates.
Yeah, they were.
There was no Al Qaeda there. It's like, if you're an Al Qaeda affiliate, you're Al Qaeda. Don't you get that?
Actually, yeah, they were. Oh God, they were an Al Qaeda branch, not an affiliate, under the command of Mohammed al Zawahiri, the brother of Ayman al Zawahiri, who had been freed from a Syrian prison by that other friend of the Democrats, Assad. And it was Al Qaeda in eastern Libya and the Maghreb. And that was it. And everybody knew it who had any idea of what was going on.
Well,
And for the guys in the chat here, though, eh, they didn't do anything to the body of Ambassador Stevens. The pictures that you saw, awful that they may be, was that of regular people who rescued him and took him to a hospital. He died in the hospital.
yeah. And as for oh, whoosh, just went right out of my head. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. No, it's this sort of thing that. Okay, that's what I was going to say. The New York Times reported that it was Al Qaeda, and then they wrote a grand debunking of the claim that Al Qaeda had attacked, and they debunked themselves without pointing out that they were debunking their own article of a few months earlier. And the grand debunking article that they wrote was pure fiction. They just made it up.
It was okay, but the problem is that they had to toe the line of the narrative pushed by the White House.
Hmm?
They had to protect Hillary at all costs. Remember that she was sick. She had the cold. She couldn't answer questions or anything. They sent that imbecile. By the way, have you noticed how every time they need somebody to lie through their fucking teeth, they pick somebody from Howard University?
Yeah, yeah. No, it's
Amazing, isn't it?
all these universities are hotbeds of future democratic scoundrels. I don't know. It's just the good news about all of this stuff. I mean, the Israeli killing of Nasrallah. This is a watershed moment for a lot, not just for the Middle East, but also for here, because basically the Israelis.
I'm Israel High.
Yeah, the Israelis told Biden to go pound sand, and the Biden administration has admitted that they have absolutely no leverage over Israel. They've tried everything, and okay, the bombing of Nasrallah. You told me that the Israelis said they used 83 one-ton bombs.
Yeah, but let me show something before we move on. And if YouTube decides that they want to suspend me again for showing you a video, I don't care. But this is something. This is and there is so much you can say about this lamentable clip. But this is where the U.S., while Israel managed to take Hezbollah apart in 10 days, this is what the U.S. is doing.
Reports circulate about a strike in Lebanon. Secretary Austin spoke by phone earlier today to his Israeli counterpart, Minister Gallant. The United States was not involved in this operation, and we had no advanced warning. Minister Gallant spoke with Secretary Austin as the operation was already underway. This operation happened within the last few hours. We are still assessing the event and don't have any additional information or any further specifics to provide at this time. But with that, I'd be happy to take your question.
Clown!
How about that?
Why in the world would the Israelis tell Lloyd Austin they're about to do this? Because 5 minutes after they told Lloyd Austin, then Nasrallah would know.
God, that you think it would take that long?
No, you're right.
And the thing is this: number one, the quality that stupid cow that you just watched is the spokesperson for the Department of Defense for the Pentagon.
Because she's what's known as a DEI hire.
Absolutely, she cannot even read properly.
No.
I mean, there are people I don't like. There is Admiral Kirby. I don't like him, but at least he can speak. This woman never lifts her eyes from the script. Then I can answer questions, but of course she knows shit.
No, I mean, the whole thing is just ridiculous. I mean...
And 6 hours later, the Pentagon was saying, oh, yeah, we knew, we support it.
Well, what else are they going to say? The Israelis wiped out most of the Houthi threat in an afternoon after we had been impotently sitting offshore, wringing our hands. The Israelis killed Hezbollah, killed Nasrallah. What else are we going to say? Yes, we gave our okay. We gave our permission, and we said, "Have at it, my fellow Jewish people." Even though I'm not Jewish, I mean, we look like idiots. We look like clowns, and the Israelis obviously don't take us seriously right now.
Of course not.
They shouldn't. I mean, Lloyd Austin, buffoon. It's
the yellow-bellied asshole of Afghanistan is what they should call him.
Well, he's not anywhere near, the caliber of people in the Israeli armed forces who, you see the Army Chief of Staff up at the front with his rifle talking to the troops, You see the Minister of Defense up at the front with his rifle talking to the troops. Nobody talks about this, but when I looked at the Israeli list of casualties in Gaza, it was like colonel, major, captain, colonel, major, captain, colonel, major, captain, because they were all at the tip of the spear in these operations. And
because unlike the Russians, the tip of the spear is not cannon fodder, but those with experience and the higher chance of survival.
Well, exactly. And officers who give orders and then they take part themselves because their moral sense requires that they take the same risk as their men and women. So
I cannot ask a man to go and die if I'm not willing to go with him.
Exactly. I mentioned Curtis LeMay earlier. Curtis LeMay, during the bombing campaign in Europe, he issued an order that any plane that turned back for spurious reasons, such as overheated engine or whatever, the pilot and the co-pilot would be immediately court-martialed. And then he led each bomber formation personally, piloting the aircraft, taking the most risk as the lead aircraft, So again, he was making a draconian decree, but then he put himself in harm's way so that the men would know that he was taking the same risks they were. And I mean, think about where we are today. Russia is pathetic. The Chinese are building submarines that decide on their own to take a dive to the bottom of the ocean. Um, Hezbollah is wiped out in like a week after pounding their chest for 30 years. We would kill you. We would kill you. We would kill you.
Israel cannot invade Lebanon. Hezbollah is a big army. They're gonna be
Exactly.
defeated. Some asshole said that Hezbollah was going to uh, lure Israel, defeat him, and then take Haifa.
Well, okay. The Israelis have revealed a Hezbollah plan to repeat October 7th, only
Yeah,
on a grander scale. There's one little problem. Hezbollah's so-called fighters, the only time they've ever really been used to fight in a war was in Syria, and they all came home in boxes.
yep.
All their victories against the Islamic State were negotiated where they sent buses in and they bust out the Islamic State, and then they took the position and went ay 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 and filmed themselves waving their flag.
Wait. Were they Lebanese or Mexican?
Well, they were. I mean,
Ay.
well, they were Lebanese, but if you're crossing the border or down south,
Oh, you're gonna find Lebanese and cartels working side by side.
well, and unless you interrogate each person one by one, which we're not obviously doing anymore, one sort of swarthy guy is going to look just like any other swarthy guy, and I don't know. It's just the whole thing is we've discovered that our enemies, all the power our enemies had, we gave them ourselves. Russia, the second most powerful armed force in the world.
Yeah,
on
in the New York Times scribe mind.
exactly.
Yeah, but by the way, the ay. It's a very Mexican thing because have you ever heard of the ay bird?
Oh God, tell me about the I bird.
The ay bird is a Mexican bird. It's a curious little bird with beautiful plumage, taken a line from Monty Python. And it has legs this long and balls this big. And every time it comes in for a landing, it goes, ay, 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 ay. And that's where the Mexicans get the phrase.
Alrighty then.
Yes, just
Very
so you
fine.
know. No. Ay, ay, ay.
I've never
Just
seen a bird.
think of the poor little bird. That is not a problem Hezbollah soldiers have anymore.
True. I also noticed in all the newsreel footage, I saw the video of the exploding Hezbollah commanders. Every one of those men was drastically overweight. And when you see the propaganda photos and videos of all their cannon fodder, these guys are all like pencils. They're being given starvation rations while their commanders are cramming down fatty lamb or what the hell they eat. But it's just, I mean, the world could be much better if everybody acted like Israelis. That's all there is to it.
I mean, there are things that cannot be tolerated. Here, because the moment you do, you lost. There should be no negotiation with terrorists ever. It only encourages them. It only facilitates the funding of their operations. It only gives them the recognition they crave. The answer to a demand from a terrorist should be a 1-ton bomb. And that's it. Israel has had to contend for the past year with the Western public and governments hell bent on stopping them. with all kinds of threats i- of cutting off of supplies, cutting off of trade in parts we use for threats of dislocating the Israeli economy at the point where they are the most vulnerable. It is malicious in the extreme. And under those conditions, they had to tread carefully, and they did. And what could have taken a month, it's taken 11. They have shown the world in the past 15 days that the paper tigers the world created around them are nothing. Iran is not much stronger than Hezbollah. Some may argue that Hezbollah was the strength of Iran.
I think so, given that the grand Iranian attack on Israel of 300 missiles and drones, half of them never got off the launch pad.
Mm-mm. And everybody's expecting Iran's retaliation because, after all, nobody's talking much about this. But Soleimani's successor was killed by Israel about a year ago. His successor was killed by Israel 3 weeks ago. His in Damascus, remember that one next to the consulate? His successor just became one with the cosmos in Nasrallah's headquarters, because it wasn't just Nasrallah; it was all of the Iranian advisors that were there, including the commander for Syria and Lebanon of the Revolutionary Guards.
Well, okay, we're talking about pretty low quality opponents. Do you have the video of the strike on Nasrallah's bunker?
Funny you should ask. By the way, let me see. Are we still? We're still in YouTube. So let me first, people in YouTube, thank you so much for playing. We're now going into the Adult Swim. So if you want to keep on watching, by all means, please do come over to Odyssey. The link is right there. It says if you want to watch the whole video, click here. Click there, and you'll be here. You'll be able to participate in the chat and watch the rest of the show. Otherwise, you guys have a good night and see you next week. How about that? Am I being nice?
Definitely.